Okay, it is 7:01 on the 21st, and we will call the meeting to order. Our roll call, Jerry has that by the list of participants. Jerry, the last time we met, we didn't have a quorum, so would we have to approve minutes from the meeting prior to that?
Yeah, I guess that would be the case. I actually didn't include the minutes as a part of this of the agenda packet, though. So thanks for pointing out my failure there. I guess
Yeah.
we can do it at the next meeting, or we can, I guess if everybody's received a copy of them by email, so I guess it's possible to approve those, but I'll leave it up to the members to.
Does everyone feel comfortable with accepting the meeting, approving the minutes from the 17th was our last meeting? Any thoughts, discussion?
Or any motions?
Or any motions?
Motion to approve.
Yeah, second.
I second.
Okay, look, was that Bruce?
Vin and Larry.
Oh, Vin and Larry. Okay, thank you.
Any discussion on those meetings from the minutes from the 17th? If not, all in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Show of hands or an aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Any abstentions? If not, I guess we have those approved, the minutes from the 17th approved.
Thank you for that.
Our next agenda item would be 4, which would be public comment. Is there anyone?
No.
No one there now. Okey doke. So on to number 5, our new business. So number 1 is to discuss a future potential presentations to the Board of Ed and the RTM. I know we had tried to get the Board of Ed, we invited them to the town council meeting and they weren't there, or I don't believe they were there. I think the mayor talked about that.
Yeah, just an update on that. I did speak with Jay Weitlauf, the Board of Ed member on the task force here, and he said that for some reason the Board of Ed members did not get kind of the invite in a way where they could participate. So it's unclear to me. I know Jay watched it on YouTube, that meeting, the presentation on YouTube. I'm not clear if any other members of the Board of Ed saw it. I did call over to the superintendent's office and ask them about, whether or not the board would be interested in us doing a presentation to them, and if so, what that process might look like for us to get on an agenda. So that's out there, but I don't have any. I don't know how many members actually saw the presentation on YouTube, and nor do I know if they want to, entertain us coming in and doing a presentation at one of their meetings. And in terms of the RTM, it's kind of the same thing. I have not heard back yet whether the RTM would want to have us make a presentation there as well.
I mean, I would be all for it. I mean, we can't, I think the Board of Ed is very important because it's a lot of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the RTM would be just as important, and word out and what we're doing and make sure they get the right story on what we're delivering so that everyone's on the same page. But I guess we would have to reach, I guess we'll have to wait for them to reach back out to us.
I would kind of echo what Frank said. I think it's important that the Board of Ed get kind of in the loop on this, because I kind of feel like they're not right now, just based on some discussions I've had with people. And I actually had a meeting scheduled a couple of days after our presentation with a couple of members, school community members, or not community members, school staff members. And I had actually sent them the link to our meeting. And I don't even think any of them actually were really informed as to what was going on. I just kind of think there's a lack of communication between, or they're just not, haven't been kept in the loop along the way, even though these meetings are public. I think we need to kind of work that a little bit more.
This is Portia Bordelon. I also think that they have to play an active part here. I mean, we can't like spoon feed it to them either. I mean, I think it's important that they've known that this task force exists. People know. I mean, I don't know how much more you can put it out there. I think it's very important that they are involved in this, and that, I mean, I don't know. I think there is a disconnect, and that's why we have a task force. So
yeah, but I don't know how much turnover there's been since the task force started with the Board of Ed or school administration. I don't know how many of them were even aware that we existed, but
Yeah, I guess it was before your time here, Vin, but we did, I did communicate with the chairman of the Board of Ed and asked for, recruited members to be on the task force, and it ended up being Jay Weitlauf, because he, I think, is the facilities representative on the Board of Ed, I think, and also the high school principal and the middle school athletic director, but those two have since kind of decided that their participation was no longer necessary, I guess I would say. We were having some trouble getting quorum, so I did invite members, if you were not planning to attend, to kind of jump off, so we didn't have such a high bar for reaching a quorum in meetings. So, in terms of board members, Jay, I think he's been at least a fairly regular participant. He's often on the calls, but not often saying anything, I guess I would say.
Gary, did Jay give you any indication of, what he thought about us making a presentation to the board, or?
Yeah, I guess he didn't know exactly how many members of the board were on the watched the town council meeting, so he couldn't answer that question when we last talked. I think it was earlier this week or late last week. I don't remember which, but yeah, he saw it, but he wasn't sure how many others might have seen it as well.
Gary, what was his take on it though? I mean, like, on some level, we're relying on Jay to be kind of our liaison back to the board. I was definitely disappointed the board didn't show up. If it's because of links and stuff like that, I understand, but I definitely think we need to keep them involved. And obviously, since our highest priority item is the high school, and they control that property, if they're not willing, or they don't think it's a need, or they don't want to make it a priority, then that kind of changes everything as far as how, what our recommendations might be. So
yeah, and this is just kind of maybe a feeling I got from Jay when we spoke, that it seemed like he was saying that the Board of Ed puts a lot of weight into the work that the task force is doing, and that this group is the expert in the town, or is handling this appropriately, and whatever comes out of this task force, I think I got just the general sense that, yeah, they agree with what we're doing, and want to get to a solution, and they're trusting us to do the good work and come up with the proposal. I think that's the overall sense I got from him. But again, he's one member of the board. He's not the entire board. He's it's
right.
just him, and
right.
he's been a part of these meetings. So I don't know how far that goes.
Yep, no, that's good. I mean, it's good to at least hear that that's hopefully his feeling. And then I do, so I think we need to figure out what's the right approach. If it's a full presentation of them, if they just want an initial, packet that they can review, whatever it is, but obviously they're pretty key and critical to making sure we go forward. And maybe it's a presentation, a small group meeting with Sam to kind of go over facilities specific with the high school, and maybe get his opinion on it as well. And then as far as the RTM, Bruce, do we need a referral to the RTM? Like, what's the best way to kind of get the information to them? Oh, you're muted.
I would say that they should get on the agenda to present. That's all they can. They don't have to do anything else. And then seek any questions or input. But I don't think there would be anything to vote on, right? It would just be for them to see and ask questions.
Yeah, I think it's to kind of inform them, because when I was there that other night for a different topic, there was a couple of letters that came in because it was right after our presentation of the town council, kind of preempting our being able to release the information to the RTMs. I think it's critical that we get the information to them, and I just want to make sure we follow whatever their best process is. So if it's good on the agenda, make a presentation, then we should figure out the best way to get there.
Yeah, and get them the presentation ahead of time and encourage them to watch, because with 40 plus people, it gets bulky.
Yeah, and just contact the moderator.
Yep.
I have a question. Was that presentation recorded, and can that just be presented instead of having to re-present it all over again?
It was recorded. It is on the town's YouTube channel. So it is out there for, public consumption right now. Yes.
And Larry, you could say, to your point, the moderator could say to the RTM that, the committee is going to be at the meeting. Please watch, send the presentation in PowerPoint form, and send the link on to watch it, and just forego the presentation and just be there for questions. You certainly can do it that way, but and I probably would say that's probably the better way. It's just there's going to be members who don't watch it and who just read it, and or neither, but from a RTM meeting, I would say you're probably better off doing that, just because there's 40 people who want to ask questions. And
yeah, I just thought trying to use technology.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Yeah.
I agree. I think if you submit the PowerPoint and a link to like the council meeting video, and encourage people to generate any thoughts or questions, and maybe have like 5 or 10 bullet points that you want to just target, just to kind of say, here's how long we've been, this is our goal, this is what we're doing. And then, hopefully people have watched it, and just be available for questions. I agree with Bruce on that.
To Chad's point, with going back to the Board of Ed real quick, that can be, as he said, a choke point, because we've kind of looked at the Board of Ed and the high school as we haven't prioritized yet, but all of our discussions has been how that will have a ripple effect down through the rest of the plan. They're with the high school principal and the middle school athletic director. I think they joined the task force at the direction of, or at the suggestion of Dr. Grenier. So they could be a liaison back to him. Now, shortly thereafter, he announced his retirement. So I'm not so sure how the new superintendent is up to speed on the whole thing. So there has been, to Vin's question, there has been a change in the administration. So that's a point that needs to be looked at.
Just kind of thinking way outside the box here. I don't know how to phrase this delicately, but I don't think the Board of Ed particularly cares about, the men's softball league. Their vested interest is the schools. So would it be a bad idea to kind of maybe come up with not a completely different presentation, but maybe something that says, hey, this is how it's going to impact the schools, or this is what we envision for the schools, like a separate school kind of tailored toward the schools?
I agree with that to a point, Vin. Certainly, I think their focus will be on schools. I think Councilor Franco actually said it pretty well in the meeting with the council, that the Board of Ed and the town have been enmeshed. That our solution in the town of Groton is to have these shared facilities that everybody uses. And even in our discussions, in this on this task force have been, the whole scheduling thing. When you get down to how do I get access to these fields if they're made, after the school day and things like that, and how does the town, at large work together, both the board and the Park and Rec side work together to kind of allocate these fields, well, to the benefit of the residents of the town. So I don't think that there is they're not going to be really interested in the Claude Chester property after they give it up, but there certainly is going to be, I think, some overlap in terms of how scheduling works and how Parks and Rec works, and what kind of burden, if any, is going to be put on the schools to, accommodate these various leagues and things like that, that aren't school uses, that are community uses. So I think there's a little bit of overlap, but I do mostly agree with what you just said there, Vin.
And I kind of assumed that when the principal of the high school and especially the AD of the middle school kind of stepped back and you were stepping in, that you were kind of the, you're it from the school administration. And I assume that there's some sort of communication going back to them. Like if you have a standing meeting with, the principal, that you're communicating stuff back to him, and maybe that's not happening because of like the whole COVID thing at the moment. I'm curious if is that communication happening within the school? Like, are you tasked with getting back to them, or are you siloed?
Yeah. I'm seldom silent.
Okay, well, not silent, but siloed. Like, are you kept over,
No, no, Ted has asked me a few times, hey, what's going on with the field committee? And
Okay.
keep me in the loop. And I've, sent the emails, and I forwarded the presentation to
Okay.
the superintendent and to Ted and to other people. But again, I don't know. My last suggestion wasn't thinking that there is an overlap. I certainly agree that there's definitely overlap, et cetera. But I'm just thinking in terms of a Board of Ed presentation, their mindset may be, how does this impact us? How does this impact the kids in the schools versus, other organizations or summer leagues or things like that,
Yep, I think it's a good point. And I think it's easy enough to tailor a little bit to just focus the time we spend with them on the real school needs and just highlight the rest of the community stuff, and obviously acknowledge that there's a mix, and that the shortage for one ends up being a shortage for the other. But then really get into the, what we really need is A, do they support our decision? And then B, how the heck do we go forward from there, right? Like, is it a school board project? Are they going to take the charge and run with it, or do they expect the task force to do that? So,
right. And the other point that came to my mind was, the other stakeholders. I've had conversation with coaches about what's going on, and a lot of them are out of the loop, and it's people that are directly impacted. I mean, other than Rich Acosta, right? Yeah. So And, you know, they don't know what's going on with us and, you know, there's no, I don't know. I think you get my point, but a lot of the stakeholders that need to be in support of this, I think are kind of out of the loop is I guess the overall point.
I think one of the things with the Board of Ed and I think there's a lack, and we'll have to tailor this somewhat in the presentation. I think there is somewhat of a lack of awareness of exactly how much the high school program does affect the town's ability to use the fields that they have, and how much the high school is dependent upon the fields around town. I think there's definitely a lack of awareness of how much impact there is. They see it flowing and they see it happening and they know the kids have a place to play, but I think many of them don't realize how much busing there is, how much use there is of facilities around town and not being done at the high school. So I think that definitely would need to be part of the presentation that was made to the board, that number.
It's kind of like it's just the way it's always been, so it's fine.
Exactly.
I also agree with that.
Do we have,
I also think it's important to make sure that the presentation for the Board of Ed includes like the surrounding schools, which you did a good job at really, you know, highlighting that. Because, you know, we constantly are talking about increasing all these different programs academically, but from an athletic standpoint, we're so far behind our neighbors. It's which brings me to my next point that, you know, after talking with other towns, it seems like within their school system, Board of Ed, in collaboration with their town, they have a committee, but theirs is driven by their Board of Ed, and their Board of Ed, you know, town council, we have different things that we're a part of, and Board of Ed are part of, you know, they have finance, they have, you know, different subgroups that they all individually choose to be a part of. And it doesn't seem as if they have anything that is directly related to sports and fields. And once again, this task force can't make them do that, but I think I don't know. I mean, so they have to kind of want to do that, you know, that they're going to make this a priority. Beyond this, I mean, if even if we were already up, even if all the fields were already up to date and we got our wish, you know, they have to create at some point, there's going to be a chokehold. They need to create something where there's somebody constantly meeting like this from the Board of Ed standpoint and saying like, what do we need? Okay, where are we at? Reassessing and maintaining and kind of making that part of like a standing item or a committee. That's what I'm trying to say, I guess. Thank you.
So I think to maybe wrap this up, I taken several notes here, but in terms of action items, I think we really need to, and we being me, I think I need to follow up with both the superintendent's office to, and maybe even reaching out to the chairwoman of the Board of Ed, and also, you know, following up with the RTM to get on that agenda. And you know, to take Bruce's point there, the idea that we, you know, maybe point them at the recorded session and the slides, and then be there to answer questions. It might go a little easier for such a large group. So I will follow up on those two items and update folks by probably email in between meetings as those things hopefully come to become a little more solid.
And also, just to be clear, it was Larry's idea. It was a good one.
Oh,
Like,
well,
to
Larry's idea that Bruce agreed with.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, sorry, Larry. You need to shortchange you there.
We're a team.
Okay, so number 2 on our new business was to discuss the priority issues of the whole shooting match. I know that I understand the priority and what people are looking for. Personally, what scares me when I hear priority is that we're going to break it into little pieces and do one after the other, and of quite frankly, I believe that that's why we're in the situation we're in today. I think when the question was asked, I believe both Chad and Jerry both responded pretty much the same way, as we kind of did it in chunks, if you would, thinking that that would be a better way to, to more bang for the buck, trickle down effect from doing the high school first, it rolls down and continues on. So I don't know what everyone else feels about the prioritization, but I just don't want it. I would hate for it to end up with, oh, it's number one, so we're going to do that, and then have a nice day. Because I think that it comes, I guess being new at all this, it's obviously comes down to money, right? I mean, that's really what the driver of all this will be. So.
Have we thought about getting a website going? Like, I just got out of a meeting for Groton Long Point Bridge meeting about the redevelopment of that. Is there any way that we could get a link or something where we kind of post our ideas and kind of keep, people can comment? And I think the common denominator tonight is everyone's saying a lot of people don't know. And I think we really need to get the word out more, as much articles that we can get out or just any publications to the community. I know it was in the paper. We just really got to keep that effort. And I'm not sure if having a link to a very basic site where it's kind of getting feedback from the community and just really kind of seeing, keeping all of our ideas uploaded so people can access them in one big cluster. I don't know, just a way of kind of saying, this is where, here's the whole map, and have people start weighing in and just be able to access it. Is that possible?
Portia, I think the answer to that question is yes, it is possible. I am actually, personally involved in updating the Parks and Rec web pages. The town has a new website these days, and they've given certain staff members the keys to the kingdom for, to post things. So yeah, that is possible. I can put out information like the PowerPoint presentation, a link to the YouTube channel, other things like that. I'm not sure that I want to make it into some kind of a dialogue place, but more of a clearinghouse of information rather than a place to do dialogue. I think that we could do some of that on our, our Facebook page or things like that, where we more of a dialogue situation. But and before I shut my mouth here, I just wanted to recognize that it looks like Jay just showed up from the Board of Ed. And also, I apologize earlier. I didn't mention that Rich has joined the Athletic Fields Task Force. So he's probably been at more meetings than any other one of us individually. So I guess it's time that we reconstitute the task force and actually make that official. So Jay, I don't know if you want to weigh in with, we did have a bit of a discussion that I don't think you heard about presenting to the Board of Ed. So I don't know if I saw you on mute. So if you're speaking, I can't hear you.
He messaged me a little while ago and asked if we had a quorum because he said he was having audio issues.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Now we hear you.
Okay. So as we discussed the other day, Jerry, the board's under the impression they were going to get invited to that town council meeting. So what they actually received were invites to watch on GMTV. So I didn't want anybody to think that it was for lack of interest, but everybody was told to watch it on GMTV. So I've sent a message to the chair to see if she wants to schedule another presentation for anybody who didn't see it. But right now we're very deep, obviously, in budget preparation because we're under the gun to present that by next month.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jay. Part of our discussion here today, before you got on, you might not have heard it, was that, if the board is interested in having a presentation, we could tailor it a little bit more to focus more on the field, the school aspect of things rather than, the community-based fields. But also, Councilor Bordelon there mentioned, the really trying to get a consensus for how we're going to move forward and working together more closely. So she was talking about there are some key people perhaps in the town that aren't aware, and so I guess maybe that brings us up to speed there, where we were just trying to talking about the priority and making sure that everybody in town is informed, everybody from the Board of Ed to the RTM to user groups and members of the public, I guess.
Okay, so I guess we're back to the priority question. How would this task force like to attack that? What do we think will best work? Bruce, you can go first.
I was a fan of priority and understood the reasons why you guys didn't want to. But no matter, from my standpoint, no matter how you slice it, it always does come down to money. And, depending on how the council approaches it, could have a great effect on what gets done and what doesn't get done. So if they went the route of bonding and they went through a referendum, that might that might include most of the plan. But if they were looking at it piece by piece in the CIP, there's only a certain amount you're going to get done each year, or try to get approved each year. So they need to have a priority of how they want to do it. I think there's a number of ways you could do it. You could say, you could do what we feel is most important, or pair things up to, like we were talking before, like everything at the high school first. Or, there's several ways to approach it, but I think no matter how we do it, there was several members on the council who were pretty clear about wanting to see how we were going to prioritize it. So I think that, we can try, if there was a concern about how to do that, we could make a couple of different priority lists, one based on, if we went the location route, then we'd like to see everything at the high school done, then everything of that. If we went through the needs of the town overall and said, if you really want to know what's most important, what we're missing the most is this, and then go that route. And I would think we should try to attach some kind of dollar value to each item, so that, I'm sorry, my dog apparently agrees with everything, but put some kind of price tag to each thing, so that because, and Portia, you can answer to this too, that I think the council may choose things based on money. So even if we had something that might be number one and was $1 million, they may say, oh, we only have 300,000, and look at the list and see what they could do. Or put the 300,000 aside in a CIP for a 2-year plan where, one thing is done and another thing is done. But I think, if they're going to go the CIP route, they need to know what the priorities are. And if they ended up going a bonding route, you have to have a whole selling plan to the constituents to vote it in. So.
Yeah,
And maybe
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Jerry, it's Jim. Just maybe if we're going down that route as well, with respect to prioritization, we think about what we have to bundle in terms of each of those priorities. So I'm just thinking example, the amenities plus the fields, right? What I don't want to have happen is we think about building several fields and we end up in the same boat we are now, where we don't have the amenities to support the field. So if we're going to do, say, a soccer field or a softball field, everything needs to come with that as part of that priority package. So maybe that's one way that we can sort of consider how we would bundle what needs to be done sort of in the same round, and present that as our first pass anyway.
I'm also nervous about the prioritizing. I mean, I once again, we can prioritize and lump this and lump that, but we're in the situation we're in because nothing's moved for so many years. And so there was no prioritizing and no package and no attention from Board of Ed to all involved members everywhere in our community. You know, it just was not a priority, and it has not been. The way that we do our CIPs, I don't think are the most effective either. I mean, these random CIPs pop up, they're not coherent, you know, nothing kind of meshes, like there's no plan. It's like, oh, the football field needs to be resurfaced. Okay, but did anyone look at the fact that the whole design and everything is really not up to speed? That's where I think we're just missing a piece in this town. And I don't know how else to say it, is that there needs to be like a standing group that is prioritizing, but you're looking, you know, you're not gonna, you know, paint your walls when your roof is leaking, right? You need to put the roof on. Like there's just things need to happen in a strategic manner. And I feel like we miss that so much in this town. And so it's right now the priority is everything. We're at that point. And so that's where it is for me. It's everything. It's like, we need to get up to speed, and then we can start to bank on the prioritizing as we go. The problem is how we are going to fund it. But there are things and funds out there that other districts and school districts have, boards and things that, you know, that have applied for different funding to get. And I don't know if they're available still. That's to not be heard. But before we prioritize, we really should look out to see what funding is available for these items before we cut ourselves off before we begin. That's kind of where I'm at. You know, we can say, you know, you want one thing, but there might be an opportunity for more, but we don't know. So I'm kind of torn. I'm just kind of feeling, I know everything needs to be done, and I just don't want to get in this situation again. So, and I know it all costs money. So.
I think that, you know, when prioritizing, and if that's the way it comes, or whichever way the plan is presented, it brings to up number 3, which is on our agenda a little bit, because they are connected. You know, if with the synthetic field versus grass field, there is a cost that has to be figured in. So we talked about very early in the process about how fields get scored. You know, if a field has lights, it gets 1 score. If a field is synthetic, can be used more. There's more usage that goes along with certain fields. So I think that has to be part of the prioritization, talking about what would happen if you put a grass field at the high school instead of a synthetic field. What would happen if you just used all synthetic fields, which was basically what we were talking about. But if we were to go to some grass fields, that would increase the number of fields necessary to meet the usage. We've talked about that. So that needs to be part of that prioritization. And, you know, how something like as simple as putting lights on the existing middle school field would help with the usage at the high school, and perhaps cut down on the number of fields you might need. So all those things, and that goes for all the fields we've been talking about. So that has to be included.
One point I would make about the whole priority issue, and particularly as it relates to CIPs. The CIPs are approved annually by the elected officials in the town. So, you know, if you do this kind of in a systematic way through the CIPs, kind of every year at budget time, you go through and you have to make the argument, win the argument, and, you know, get funded in a CIP for what's due that year. That's one kind of hard part about it. Another hard part is, what was my train of thought? There were 2 hard things about that. in fact, actually, that the elected officials in the town are elected for 2 years, so you've got potential turnover on the council or in the RTM, members who kind of have bought into this, the commitment to put this in a CIP in a structured way. In 2 years, you might have different people who have different priorities, and that commitment is not necessarily there anymore. So that, that's a reality that we have to deal with in dealing with it through a CIP. So yeah, I mean, do you fight one really big battle, or do you fight a series of small battles? And yeah, just to throw that out there as a, as kind of something that maybe could factor into our thinking.
Larry, you had your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree, that it's all important. It's really hard to prioritize, but if we had to prioritize, and if we do that, just kind of a simple way that I see it in my mind is basically from the top down. Fort Hill, starting at the high school and then working down, to Sutton Park and then to Claude Chester site eventually. If I were to simply prioritize, in my mind, what I think is kind of 1, 2, 3. And I don't know if this is something that we would do, or if it's even too early, but would it be possible to even reach out to our state reps and invite them to a meeting and see if there's any state money available that they could, try to fight for us for something like this?
Bruce is shaking his head yes.
Yeah, I think they should be invited, and why not, while we were at it, I mean, Portia mentioned it before, like, go to federal. Why not ask Courtney to look into it too, or,
I mean, we do have the Navy base here. We're a Navy community.
Yeah.
Pfizer's making a lot of money on those shots right now. I'm just kidding. Sorry. No, but I do think that I think other towns have really done a really good job because they had, like I said, a really strong, committee. And, I even think this athletic task force should have its own Facebook page, really, like that. It's got updates and, people are, just everything where, I know Waterford Dominion will rise up and support and help pay for fields out there. I mean, sometimes Groton doesn't really ask, right? The need, like people don't know, no one's talking about it. And I think we really just need to get that word out there and get someone to write an article like Groton struggles to pay for town fields, like need money. Like it's not absurd to do that, like to really let people know that we're trying to find a way to improve our fields that are kind of in the condition they are. I think state, senators, state reps, everybody, local, companies, people would turn out possibly. We just got to create that pathway for that. That's my thought.
Well, Portia, not to put you on the spot, but as the town councilor that's here tonight, I mean, is that something, me as a private citizen, I don't feel like I can just call up any of the reps and say, hey, by the way, I'm on this task force and you should listen to this, right? But if it's coming from the town council or, a town councilor, but especially the whole council, is there a way for you guys to get, better access and get in front of them to be able to ask those questions or get at the very least, get a hold of their people so we can say, here's this document, and give them the executive summary of what we're after, so they know what to be looking for us.
I think it's even more powerful coming from a local constituent. I think if you email like Joe Dela Cruz, Chris Connolly, Heather Summers, and et cetera, I think they would definitely respond and or show up, invite them to a meeting. I mean, we could have one of our, under our new business at another meeting, we could invite our local reps and I think that's another idea.
I will do that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Larry. I mean, 'cause that's when I looked at Ledyard, I feel like Ledyard had to get the new fields, right, the school board was on board, and then the school board and the mayor and the town council pretty much all got, I shouldn't say unanimous because it wasn't, but there was a very strong leadership there across the town that it was more than time for them to put in a synthetic, turf field and upgrade their high school facilities. And the whole town kind of got behind it is the way I looked at it from outside. And we're definitely not there yet. I feel like we're still, our own little task force kind of shouting into the wind and, having a hard time just getting people to listen within the town, let alone coming out to jump and support.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And me being on the council, like I'm not the mayor. So like I only have so much. I support you guys 100% or, so that's,
yeah.
I'll do whatever I can. I think the more communication avenues that we can really put out there. Maybe I can get a few friends to write some letters to the day about how we are behind the curve with our fields, like those things need to start popping up.
Yep. And then the other thing I would say, kind of going back to that priority and funding and all that sort of fun stuff is, I'm assuming, Jerry, that the Park and Rec department still has a request as part of their CIP going forward to request funding to go out to, bid and get somebody to take this plan to the next step and really start, designing stuff and be able to put cost estimates on it, right? So I think the immediate thing that we should be doing is definitely advocating to the town council and the RTM that's important, right? Like step number one, this budget season, that needs to stay in there, because if it doesn't, we're a year behind, right? We need to be able to have funding this year, and on some level, almost push to the school board too. Jay, I heard you say, you're in the heat of budget, which I think all the town is at the moment. But if you're not putting anything in the budget for the schools for next year, then at what point does a school, we're a year away before the schools can put money into kind of doing their part also and looking at, if they're going to be the ones running the project at the high school. I just wonder when that funding starts to be asked for, and if not now, it's a year from now.
Well, I know that we've had a request for the football field. Mr. Costa may remember better than I. We've had a request in for the football field just to be recrowned for, I don't know, ever since I've been on the board, I would say 6 or 7 years. Just one small project, and it always gets turned down because there's always some other crisis.
Right. Could we turn that into something bigger than that? Right? Could we turn that into, instead of just recrowning the field, can we turn that same dollar value into, athletic field facility needs assessment or whatever it needs to be, so that it's not just myopic and looking at that field? Because I think when we first started a year ago, that was all of our reaction is, why are we spending $200,000 on a field that can only be used by one team? And that started this process. So it'd just be nice to be able to take a jump.
Yes, and in my mind, I see ADA non-compliance and Title IX issues a crisis.
The recrowning of the field has been asked for quite a bit, but one of the reasons why it has been a non-starter was because, as Chad said, last year when it was put in there was when a part of the impetus to get this committee going. So, and that's why it never made it through. Through one of the reasons why it didn't make any further than the Board of Ed.
And I think that proves the point that Jerry made, that doing this piece by piece is going to be a struggle every year when we couldn't even get this one thing done. And I agree, the Title IX issues are very important, but again, what is the priority? I hear about needing amenities at fields. I was told that when they spent the $1 million on the baseball field, they actually wanted to do more, but apparently hit roadblocks. I'm not exactly sure with what committee, but the folks that actually donated the money, the family, tried to do more, and apparently we're held up by red tape in town.
Well,
And
part
they
of
were
the
willing to
problem
pay
with
for it.
doing more was the money only ended up being $650,000, and they spent it all on what they did. So they wanted the town to pledge some money to help them with the rest of the amenities that was done. And at that point, the town was not in a position to do that, and decided not to help them put those. They were looking for bathrooms and a concession stand and all of that. And again, the town saw this as a private organization coming in, and they just didn't have the money at that point in time. So that just stopped at that point in time. And again, to the point that people are making, doing it piecemeal kind of brings up situations like that all the time. Those things happen because of not having a unified plan moving forward. And yeah.
Jay, I'm curious how the budget, so the crowning's been there for a while. Is that coming from, do the principals kind of put together their wish list of what they need from a facility standpoint? Does Sam Kilpatrick do that? Like, who's directing that? And the reason for asking is, do we go talk to whoever that person is to try to get in front of them to say, hey, look, this is, shake the tree, this is what we need, and do you agree? Because obviously it's critical, I think, for Sam and the principal obviously to agree as well that they feel these needs are important and they need to go after them as well.
Yeah, so these priorities are brought to the board, by the administration through the superintendent in terms of exactly who was in on every conversation. I really don't know over the past many years. I just know that it's just been kicked down the road, which shows that the CIP process is probably, not desirable.
I would agree with you, Jay, with that, with the CIP process. Also, too, I think from some of the meetings I attended over the last 5 years and just seeing and asking about the football field myself, it seems to me, though, it kind of is like, the school will say, like the high school will say, or Coach Costa will say, my track is, it needs to be, it needs to be surfaced. The long jump pit was never done. Okay. When the original last fix. And then they say it to the principal, and the principal brings that forward to the Board of Ed, and the Board of Ed will say, okay. And then the superintendent, everybody votes and decides to put it on there. But there's really nobody looking at the big picture. It's a bunch of people like saying, okay, this baseball field base needs replaced. Like there's no big picture from the Board of Ed, from the town, from the art. There's nobody looking at it as facilities. It's already it comes to the Board of Ed, or it seems to come to the Board of Ed when it's, oh, this is already broke. Like, for example, let's crown the field. So the last however many years, let's crown the field. But no one's talked about, oh, the bathrooms and the concession stand and the bleachers. Like, do we really want to crown a field when the whole structure needs repair? So that's what I'm trying to say. And it's not a fault. It's how do we fix our system in our town? It's a systems issue for me. How do we recreate that wheel so that we look at things, or there's somebody addressing it as a facilities need?
So I've taken a lot of notes on here on this discussion item, and the only action item I have here is that Larry is going to write letters to our elected officials. So I don't know that. I guess I'm hearing what I think is some consensus on that. Doing this through CIP makes a lot of us nervous, but we do recognize that. I think the elected officials in town are going to be looking for some sort of prioritization. So, as much as it pains us to do that, I think we probably need to do that in some way. Our number one recommendation probably could be, we think that there's handling this in a different way other than through a CIP might be advantageous to the town for a bunch of reasons. But if you choose to do it through CIP, here's kind of what we see as the priorities. That's kind of what I'm hearing, and I don't know if folks agree with that or not.
Could a recommendation be that we look at the structure and how we get to these points to become a CIP as a recommendation? Like, is there something saying that we couldn't write something from this committee as a recommendation to the Board of Ed and the town to have some standing committee that's a facilities committee, like other school districts have, that have like you have your academic, you have your math department, you have this. Where is from the high school standpoint, right? We can take it, Jerry, you're from the Parks and Rec end, so you could handle but where is it from internally in the school? Because we identified that the school was like one of the higher needs that I heard from the committee. So how can we make a recommendation stating that we would recommend that they have a facilities committee to look at the broader issues so that they can address these, in a collaborative, because they could, other districts, from what I've heard, and as some of the research I've done, their board will their education department will apply for grants when they become available for certain needs. For programming, for their athletics. So, I looked at East Lyme, I looked at some of our forerunners in the area. So they drive this internally, which doesn't have to get town approval. It doesn't need a town council to say, yes, we're going to pay for the CIP. They can go after their own funding for their own athletic fields as well. So I just think it's a structure issue in our town.
The Board of Ed does have a Finance and Facilities Committee. And so all of those ideas are brought to it and then go to the board and then go to the town council. But the point is that they've all been turned down. Now that Vince is on board, I'm hoping to hear more from him. And we have Rich Costa with the institutional memory of what's gone before. And the board is pursuing a number, in the past few years, a number of multi-million grants for academics. And certainly, we can look toward athletics.
Okay.
So yeah, all those pieces are in place, but there just doesn't seem to be a will in the town. It would have been nice if this had all been taken up with the original committee for the new schools. If this had been this would have been a very small fraction of that huge referendum, but that was not brought apparently to that committee. It wasn't a priority. Now, obviously, they are replacing all of the fields at the sites where the new schools are. But if we go back to that town committee that existed for how many years to determine how many schools we're going to have, apparently there was no push for it then. That would have been the ideal time to finance all this. So, if you're going to do a big project like that, rather than, these multiple bonding issues at a time when our credit limit, I'm told, is basically just about tapped out. So, but we can't change the past, but we can just, look toward the future. Right. But I think it needs to be comprehensive.
Jay, I guess I just would make a comment, and I've been here for 20 years or so, and I can tell you that the Permanent School Building Committee efforts of trying to make inroads on that from a public Parks and Rec standpoint was anything short, or it was absolutely frustrating. I didn't ever really get hurt. Mark Romano and I went to several meetings, and it just wasn't on the agenda. With the understandably, there are the town did these large school projects, and And those are definitely the priority. And that was kind of, yeah, it wasn't enough of we weren't squeaking loudly enough or whatever it was that we just weren't able to make that get that attention. So Frank, I'm going to just maybe suggest that we move on from there to our last item.
Oh, so our last item is our discussion or our plan of action on how we want to tackle the synthetic turf versus grass field discussion argument, or how we want to go about putting a plan forward. Like I said, Chad has done a pretty good job of laying out some guidelines, sending us information, it's in the presentation on pros, cons. I don't know how everyone wants to go through that, or how do we want to attack that, if you would.
Yeah.
Just go ahead, Jerry.
One recommendation here, Frank. There is a particular group, and there are members of the council and others who are expressing some, misgivings about the environmental and safety impacts of artificial surfaces. So I guess this question isn't really, maybe we take a little bit of a step back and we look at how can we study what's the rate of injury on natural grass fields? What's the rate of injury on artificial fields? What's the staffing load for both? What is the the chemicals or whatever that you put on each of these fields to maintain turf? Can you do those chemicals on Board of Ed properties? Do you have to use organic things? And what's that going to do with the cost of maintaining fields? What's the quality of the turf going to be? And just kind of putting all of that into a comprehensive, kind of a white page, just a one pager that kind of gives you all the pros and cons of each of these, options and coming up with a conclusion. I don't, certainly I think, this group is understandably interested in getting as much field access as we can, and certainly artificial fields, support more activity than natural grass fields. I think that's a given. We just need to make sure that we do our due diligence and go through and document all of the ways. Amount of play is one thing, cost, staffing, chemicals, impact on the environment, all these other things we have to add in there and say that, is it really more expensive? Is it less expensive? Is it more expensive on the front end, or is it more expensive, over the long term with the maintenance increases? All those questions I think we need to answer. And that's so how do we go about that process of assembling that information to present it to the elected officials to, either say yay or nay to artificial surfaces?
Well, I can take an action to list kind of what you just said, right? Send that out to everybody in our committee, have them add what I miss. At least we can get almost an outline of what it is we need to go look at. I wrote some of the things you said, plus some other things, and I can send that out to the committee for people to add as well. I think Mr. Frost probably has a pretty good idea on some of the issues. I think Jerry, with your town background, I was down there the other day, and I've been down there a lot during the crisis, running around that track, and when I see what they do down there, I'm in awe of everything that they do, and the guy driving the truck and pulling up plugs, and And it's like things that, so, and that's part of a cost analysis that someone has to do, right? Somewhere along the way on how much, the Chad Frosts of the world know, how much a turf field costs. Jerry knows how much it costs to maintain Quantic Plains, for instance, just as a, and then we have the other parts of it. But I can send out at least an outline on the types of things we need to look at, and we can just, I guess, figure out a way to tackle those. But I think we need to start with what we need to look at and have everybody's input on what needs to be looked at, and then we can try to come up with a suggestion, pros and cons. I mean, I think the town will actually, probably end up making it'd be their decision at some point in time. We can only give them the facts, give them what we know in our recommendation. That's all we can do. But if we go through it all, give them as a complete picture as we can, we go from there.
My thought is that we definitely add in the both ways. At this point, I mean, I feel like more energy needs to be put on getting someone to take a hold of this, move it forward, get invested, actually cry out and say we need fields. And then, at that point, once people actually say, yes, we need fields, then those fine details will fall into place. But first, I feel like I don't want to spend too much. Personally, I would not want to. I can't tell everybody else not to, onto what type it would be. But I think we should present both types, both options for that. And then we work on that later. But the big thing right now for me is the hurdle of, okay, we have a finance and facilities on the Board of Ed. So, and then how do we this as an agenda item for them and become a priority and, move all of this so it's not wasted time and space? And how do we get it from the process of a CIP to an actual project, so it doesn't keep getting chopped up? I don't know. So I think we should definitely, my thought would be to generate both the synthetic and, the natural fields as, have them both ready to go. And that way we're prepared for whatever at this point, and we need whatever at this point.
So Jerry, let me ask a question. Your the CIP that the town has put in for someone to do a cost analysis on what we asked them to look at. I guess that's what.
Right. It's based on the presentation to the council. What is it going to cost the town to kind of build these things that we say we're needing in this thing? So there's, and Chad's much more knowledgeable about all those little steps, everything from the surveyor to the, the civil engineer to the, the turf guy, the grass guy. I mean, there's all kinds of things, or the building guy. How much, what is the architect going to do? All those kinds of things. There's costs involved with all of that. And we have to kind of figure out what, are we talking, $1 million a field, $1.5 million a field, 500,000 a field? We don't, we really don't know. And
so I guess what I'm trying to get to is I'm in my head, which I probably need to write down, is a chronological order, like the steps. Because I agree with Portia, I agree with all of it. So with this, let's go with the assumption that part is completed, right? This goes through and the town is going to get money to be able to have someone put prices on everything. So what do we do in the meantime? I mean, are we, so, and I do agree, we need to go out and find other ways to get money, but how, I'm trying to find a chronological order in my head. How does that process work? I mean, there seems to be lots of different areas of people that can help us. But how do we put that in some sort of a sequence? So is it the right time to send letters? It's always the right time, right? We can get them interested. I agree with that. Write letters, but I guess I'm confused on the steps or the chronological order on how you go about doing what we want to do. We've all decided, and I think everyone understands, the CIP process is an annual event, which probably isn't what we prefer. So how do we help ourselves make that happen? Who do we, like, I love the fact that you can go to the Board of Ed and they have a finance committee, and do we reach out to them and say, what do we do? I mean, at least I don't know.
In terms of this study that is going to be done, I hope will be done, or these studies, plural, are going to help us kind of answer the questions of priority in some ways as well. And whether or not you are talking about this is something that maybe does fit better in a CIP or a bonding issue because it's so big. You know, if you bundle all the things at the high school together and you have a figure, maybe you do bond that, and maybe the town does get reimbursed from some outside funding source, and that makes it a higher priority. But maybe there isn't a funding source, so maybe we'll take a $500,000 and do one field at Sutton, or some such thing like that. So I think some of the prioritization and things like that we don't know what we don't know yet in terms of those costs. So I think to a degree, the council and the RTM approving that funding for those studies is necessary for us to, decide what's the best way for the town to move forward. I mean, maybe there are economies of scale and we save, 30% by bundling all these things into a bond rather than paying for them piecemeal over the next whatever. And and everybody says, well, okay, I know it's painful, but yeah, I'd rather, do that in a big chunk rather than paying for it more over time and not even enjoying the use of it over time because, things aren't going to come on board until later. So those are all kinds of things that I would think would go into the prioritization of actually doing that. So, I don't really have a good answer for you, Frank, about how to, what comes before what. But at least the first thing to me, the priorities, and I think Portia mentioned it too, we got to get people interested and motivated, and talking about it is one thing. And we need to get the money for the CIP to do these studies. Those are probably my two biggest priorities right now. I would hope that the task force could accomplish in the next, several months.
So kind of along those lines.
I hold off reaching out until we know if we got the CIP money.
I would say we want to make sure that we reach out now so that we do get the CIP money.
Okay.
To do the studies. I mean, like, if we don't get the studies, okay, well, doesn't matter how motivated you are, there isn't any money. So
yeah, I mean, my thought, and it's been mentioned many times tonight, that the vast majority of the public doesn't know what's going on, right? That there's 13 of us sitting here tonight. We all have a pretty good understanding of what we're talking about. We've told the council, they probably have, a very high level of what we want, but in the back, my feeling was many of them thought, well, that's great, I'd love to do it too, but I don't see where the money's going to be, and kind of shelved the idea. And without the public really advocating for it, we're not going to go anywhere. So my thought too is that what we really need to do over the next month is, kind of do that executive summary, get a one-pager or whatever it is, get that information back out to all those youth organizations that we talk to, have them distribute it through their organizations, and I would think encourage them to, if they support it, right? We need to get it out there, say, hey, public, this is what we think we need, right? And then if the public, Joe Blow supports it, suggest that they write a letter to the town councilor, to the RTM, to somebody to be able to, within the town to voice their support. Because I honestly think that's what we need to do, right? Like if the only people that go to the town council is our organization saying we need fields, I guarantee you we're getting shelved, right? It's going to need quite a bit of public support getting, reaching out and agreeing that this is necessary. And I think the best way we can do that is go through all those youth organizations that we talked to begin with. They're the ones that said they all need it, right? So get the info back, a one pager that can easily be understood by those organizations, and then can easily be distributed to all the members of those organizations, and the parents can read it and go, okay, I get it. And, and maybe there's some facts in there about everybody's nervous of budgets this year. It's not in this year's budget, right? And it's might not even be in next year's budget. So like the tax implication is a couple years down the road, but if we don't start it right now, we're already a couple years behind. So I just think we need to have that packet of information that we can send out and really get a groundswell of support, hopefully starting to form.
Hey, Jerry.
Yes, sir.
So I just want to give you an update. I don't know if Vince was on board when we took this vote, but the Finance Committee did work with the town planning department and town manager's office to come up with a proposal for $250,000 CIP for lights for the middle school softball field and $375,000 for lights for the middle school synthetic surface field. The idea being that this would obviously make these fields much more available. Now we can argue about, should we replace the field house first, but then you get into the argument that that's just used by the football team, whereas this is allowing multiple sports to use it. And so this will be an interesting test case when these CIPs go to the town council, whether they approve them or defer, to the final work of this committee.
So Jay, I appreciate that information because, as Chad says, like if we have this one pager, I think that is absolutely information that needs to be on that one pager, that there is a request in, and this is the first time I've heard that. So I'm very pleased here tonight to hear that there is a request in to do that, those projects up at the middle school fields. And as you know, the task force here is lights was one thing, but the other amenities, as I think Jim earlier mentioned, that's the other part. The restrooms and other things like that go along with it. So, but yes, I think that we can do our job here that we've all said we want to do and motivate people to approve those projects. Those both, lights on those fields was a part of our recommendation. So we need to go out and we need to support that, and we need to do that in a meaningful, big way.
So if I could just add that I do not feel that, and this is my opinion, I can't speak for the whole council, but that just from the history of the town and, solely funding things based on CIPs on the backs of just the councilors approving those or not, from past councils to current councils, is not an individualized way of funding these projects. The Board of Ed makes up more than 70-something% of the town's budget, and they have the ability to get grants for individual projects. Now, I think these ideas that are going to come forward, I'm not saying I'm going to vote those down, but what I'm trying to say is the CIP process and way can't be the golden ticket way for the Board of Ed to get sole items done or improved for the school. There has to be a different way. So here we are again, in the 30-something years that I can think of, this, we have to come up with a different system. So in that same Finance and Facilities Committee, was there any thought of looking at any way of funding these or coming up with a long-term plan of, like trying to fund items? It can't be just every year coming up with CIPs to the town for these individual items, because this is how plans never get done. And so that's what we identified. So I think it's great that these are going to come forward. But I also think that the Board of Ed, should form a way of trying to seek funding and process earlier on in the year before the budget season to try to make that work. And
we work with the planning department in the fall. There's a whole process, and when people say they haven't heard about this, I mean, I'm not surprised. If you go to the town website and you look at how many different committees meet, I really haven't read all of their minutes. If you look at all the YouTube videos, I mean, you could actually spend all week just studying Groton. But the point is, so this is the procedure that's in place. And we work with the planning department. We obviously have a long list of things we'd like, and then they bring us down to earth about what is likely, along with the town manager. And yes, the board is pursuing, we actually have now a grant writer who's been very successful with grants, and there's a lot more movement toward grants. But by the same token, we're also going to use the process that we currently have, which is the CIP process. There's no reason why we can't work along both tracks, because there's plenty of things to fund.
Jay, in response to your question.
Yep.
I think it started with a question.
Yes.
I was not on board originally with that, with the question you asked, but I met last week with the superintendent and buildings director about that specific issue, about trying to get lights on that field.
Right. Yep.
So, and the principal of the school, and the band director, and I got as many people as I thought I needed involved in that meeting to try and get that done. So,
which does not preclude, that we can look at other ways, obviously, to do it as well. And so I think we just need to be creative and, try all the funding sources. I mean, this is the town that had a family give $1 million a few years ago. So we do know that there are, there are funds out there.
And I think it's going to go back to that. I just think the communication and really letting the town, like sometimes we pride ourselves in only shining the highlights of all the good, but we don't talk about the things that we need in the town, and our fields and our high school are behind the curve. And I think we need to shine the light on that and make that the top headline, that we have work that needs to be done. And this is where we're falling short. And I think people need to know, so that, it's, I think it's important to make that known.
So Frank, I have the only, I guess we got a little bit off topic there, but the action item I have is that you were going to send out a list of what we need to look at in order to answer the question about synthetic turf. So, and then you're going to ask people to respond to you to add or subtract from that list, and then we'll tackle those types of items as we move forward.
Yep.
And then, like I say, that I guess our discussion was a little bit off of that track, but
Jerry, I have a quick question too from the synthetic turf perspective. Are there any opportunities to garner any learnings from all of the towns that have instituted synthetic turf fields at their schools recently? I can't imagine that they didn't face somewhat of a bit of a potential backlash from their communities as well, for folks that would have a concern about synthetic turf. However, they're all instituted. I know it's a school board versus necessarily maybe the town, but is there anything we can learn from how they've approached that might help us as we're trying to sort of gain the support for the synthetic fields? Thank you.
the synthetic turf companies are also a good resource. They have plenty of documentation and literature. I've seen it.
I was going to just go ahead, Chad.
Well, all I was going to say is I've got yes, Jerry. I think we put together all the questions so far, and then we put out all the possible answers that we have, and then collectively, figure out how to narrow it down to what is the answer we want to give for each one. As far as all the surrounding towns, Jim, to kind of get to that a little bit, I haven't been involved in most of them, but what I read through either the paper or through the people that I know that were involved with it, none of the surrounding towns have quite the organizations that Groton does, as far as the environmental groups that advocate strongly and use that advocacy voice. So I don't recall any of them having overcome quite the challenge so far that's been put forward to us. So I just don't think it's quite the same, but I do think all the questions that have been raised, from my personal opinion, have answers. I think we just have to get them out there, and hopefully let people, not prejudge things based on the information given so far, and be able to, take the information in that we give and make a fair decision down the road.
I was just going to say that, again, speaking solely for myself, I was very taken aback by the reaction of the council based on the like one, just one organization in town sending a letter, and the reaction of some of the council members was, oh, like the sky's falling, like this synthetic turf thing needs to be looked at. And the truth be told, and I brought it up in that meeting, there's synthetic fields that were just put in for the Board of Ed at the schools, and no one that we know of, or at least publicly, made a big deal about it. And so it just, I don't dispute the fact that it should be looked at and questioned, but my perception was that there were some on the council, not Portia, there were some on the council who were like ready to pull the plug on everything and say, hey, with the synthetic turf, I think it was really closed-minded. And so, again, just my opinion, but it was disappointing to me to see that kind of reaction just based on a letter from a environmental group. So clearly, if that's the way that it's going to go through or be reacted to, we're going to have to do some heavy lifting to oppose that, and to say, where an educated decision needs to come in with regards to the fields, because this is something that's ongoing. And I think a lot of people have brought it up tonight. Every town that I can think of right now that has put in a new field in the last 10 years, at least in football, has been synthetic. I don't think anybody's put in a grass field. And so for that kind of reaction, like Groton's nothing special, we're no different than anybody else in any other town. So I think that if that's the reaction that we're going to get, that we need to, we're going to have some really background stuff going. If that's the route we want to, that we want to really recommend, I think it's going to be an uphill fight.
I agree, Brooke. I'll just echo that also. I mean, I was borderline offended, quite personally, honestly, just because, we as a group, right, we were the task force that the town council asked, they asked us all personally to spend a year of our life thinking about this. The issue was brought up to us. It's not something that we did lightly. We definitely thought about it. The letter that we got, we didn't dismiss it. We researched it and talked about it, and gave them the, here's the Department of Public Health, here's the information, and it disputes a little bit of what's being said, and yes, there's Yale scientists that question, the safety of this, but Yale as the institution is still building synthetic turf fields. So, to kind of dismiss, it felt dismissive, I should, to dismiss this task force recommendation because of a letter of a private group that's not a task force, it's not, an official body of the town, definitely felt dismissive to me and a little bit offensive. But I think I will set that aside personally and just try to get the answers back to hopefully give them the education and the ammunition to be able to make, hopefully, an informed decision.
I agree with that. You're right. And I think that I think the only thing that we're going to have to overcome as a committee, depending on what I think our recommendation is to use synthetic for a number of reasons. But I think what we're going to have to overcome is not the impression, but what they carry in what they say. I can't think of the right word, but how much weight is given to what they have to say. I mean, clearly you can see it, because you're right. We spent a year on this, didn't take it lightly, looked at it, tried to figure out, educationally speaking, what the options were and what the circumstances are. And they immediately, there were several council members who were like, whoa,
Yeah. And so to answer your question a little bit too, I do think the issue was raised, and I think Jay also just typed it in the comments too. When the middle school field was put in as synthetic turf, I think the conservation associates, they did raise the issue. I think they pushed it hard at the planning, because I think it had to go back, if I remember right, it went back to planning and zoning for approval because it was a change from just lawn, from grass to synthetic. And there was a lot of debate then, and that's what caused the middle school to put in the coconut fiber infill. It wasn't, from what I remember, it wasn't initially proposed as coconut fiber. And I know the guys that put it in because they were doing ones for me elsewhere. Their initial proposal was crumb rubber, like most people use. And then after the contracts were signed during the planning and zoning process, I think it was forced upon the school board to change to the coconut fiber infill because of environmental concerns, whether justified or not. That was the solution. And it was a several $100,000 change order to change back to the coconut fiber from the crumb rubber. So I think there was heat put on during the middle school, and I think that was kind of the warm up. And I think we're going to get more heat put on us as we go forward if we continue down that path.
You're absolutely right, Chad. And one of the things, this is one of the reasons why the lights were left off. The lights were originally proposed, and the money that was going into paying for the lights, or if it was there, went to put in the coconut infill instead of the crumb rubber. So that was the trade-off that was done at that time.
Okay, we're up against 8:30. So we have a couple action items for people. Our next scheduled meeting would be, I think I looked at the 18th of February. 7 o'clock, same time.
Is that the meeting you would want me to invite them to? And
The elected officials, Larry?
yes. I just don't want to make that make that call on my own.
I'd say it's a public meeting, Larry, so I think you're well within your citizen role to do that.
Okay.
So if they were going to attend, maybe if you copy me on that, just then I can make sure I work with them. If they confirm they want to, then I can make sure they get the the Zoom links and all that kind of thing, and make sure that we can invite them to attend in that way, so we don't kind of go through the same thing where we treat them as badly as apparently we treated the Board of Ed and not getting out the links and stuff for them. So we're going to invite them. Please let me know so I can shepherd that through and try not to repeat a past mistake.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Okay, so we have no old business, so adjournment. Our next meeting will be the 18th.
So moved.
So Chad Frost would like for us to adjourn second.
I saw Danny.
Danny second. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
See you on the 18th.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Everyone, thank you.
Good night. Thank you.